Good morning. We're getting ready to start our service.
She probably wants to go over here so she doesn't get all scared.
Good morning. Good morning. We're getting ready to start our service. Please join us for our opening song, which is going to be Love Train. Good morning. If you would, take a moment and tell your neighbor hello to our meet and greet. What's that? let's get in those last hugs and hello. If you haven't already, you might want to take this moment to silence your cell phone. My name is Shelley, and welcome to Unity of Metairie. For those of you that are joining us on Facebook, I'm glad that you're able to join us today, and I hope you enjoy our service. Is there anyone who is attending Unity for the first time? If you are, please raise your hand, or if you would like to stand. Or if you're joining us on Facebook for the first time, I hope you enjoy our message. Our message is a message of oneness, a message of unity, a message of non-duality. Unity is a beautiful philosophy. We don't tell you what to think. We just guide you on your own spiritual path to finding your own definition of God. I'd like to let you know that today, Paul Martinez is going to be our speaker. For anyone that's heard Paul before, you know that he's very versed in music and traditions of the world religions. And so we look forward to hearing what he has to speak, what he has to say to us today. Are there any children that would like to come forward, like to give you a blessing? Or if there are any rescue pets that would like to come forward? You know, this little dog's name is Bear, and as you can see, he's going to be a bear shortly. Okay. Children, I bless you. We see you loved, guided, and protected by God's presence. And in New Orleans style, we love you hard, hard, hard. We swear to God. I'd also like to mention that Unity has a wonderful children's program. So these ideas and discussions that we have up front are also taught to the children in the back in words and activities that they can understand. So please feel free to bring your children or your grandchildren. It's a wonderful program. Paul?
Ask everyone just to sit back, relax. For those who heard me before, you know, I just like putting some music on and just let it take you wherever it takes you. Good morning. Is everybody back? I know I had a fight to come back. Read from our daily word for today. It's titled, I Believe. The Gospels poignantly communicate a father's pain and frustration when Jesus reminded him that all things are possible for one who believes. The father's son suffered from a serious illness that no one, not even Jesus' disciples, had been able to cure. I believe, help my unbelief, the father cried, and his son was healed. My journey of faith may not always be straight and smooth. I may at times reach the limit of my human ability to believe. In those moments, I surrender to the divine presence within me. Affirming, I believe, opens my mind and heart to the faith expressed in the life and ministry of Jesus. Through divine presence, the Christ in me, I believe and find the answers to my prayers. And from the Gospel of Mark, we read, immediately the father of the child cried out, I believe, help my unbelief. Here at Unity, we don't have a creed, we're not a religion, we don't say to join us, you must believe this, 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 and do this, this, and this. What we have, what we call the 5 principles that are guide, kind of quoting from Pirates of the Caribbean, they're more like guidelines instead of rules. And Jack, very beautifully over the last few weeks, as he does every year, talked about those 5 principles. Now, for me, I kind of even slimmed them down even below and easier for me than the youth version, which actually is a version I like. You can look it up online, just put Unity Principles Youth, and they'll come up. But I've kind of simplified it even more for me, that principle 1 is there's one God, one source, one divine. Principle 2, we share in that one source, one divine. We are part of divine, divine is part of us. 3, because of that, we co-create our own life and existence. And the way we stay connected to all that is principle 4, through prayer and meditation. And then in that process, principle 5, we live it out in our daily life. That for me is my personal summary of the 5 principles. But one thing I realized was it's not step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, and step 5. Because what is it that we live out in our everyday life? We live out the fact that there is only one God, one divine, that we share and are one with. It's a circle. They're all together. They complement each other. And in our life, we look at that and we say, well, how can I really connect with that in everything that I do? That question began for me years ago when I first entered college seminary. And I read a book. It's titled The Way of the Pilgrim. It actually stems from Russia. And there's still debate today of who actually wrote it or what number of people wrote it. But what the story is about is, in 1 Thessalonians, Paul writes, rejoice always and pray continuously. And the question that this pilgrim asked is, how do I always pray? How do I pray continuously? Not just when I sit down to pray or meditate, but how do I reach a point where I am always praying? Now, in this book, it comes through, they preach what was called the Jesus Prayer, which is quite simple. It's, Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, pray for me, a sinner. And this was repeated over and over and over again in his words and in his mind. And he continued to work through all the parts of the story to keep this prayer going in his head. It's a mantra. It just happens to be a very Christian mantra. But it's something that spoke to me of, okay, how do I do this? How does my whole life become part of prayer? How do I, in my life, merge the physical with the spiritual? To me, that became the question. Because too often we say, oh, this is in the physical realm, I'll handle that. And then when I'll go home, I'll get to my prayer spot, my meditation spot, I'll sit down and I'll meditate for a while so I can learn something spiritual and then bring it back to my physical life, try to live it out. When I don't succeed, I go back and I meditate and pray again, and we go back and forth. And if we add mind or intellect and emotion into that, it starts to get a little complicated. And we begin to cubbyhole things. That's where our so-called primitive ancestors didn't have that problem. Because everything was physical and spiritual at the same time. And I'll get a little more into that. So while I'm struggling as basically a freshman college student in the seminary, with that question of how do I do this, which was being talked about in this wonderful little book, began to have classes with Father Ambrose, one of the Benedictine monks there, who was actually the spiritual director for the seminary. And he was the first one who introduced me to Buddhism and even Zen. This was a great time in the church, right after Vatican II when everything was opened. And that became my problem later in life when it all started closing down again, because I couldn't. So that's why I'm here today. But this is when I first came to understand that concept of mindfulness. And in my mind, seeing how do I connect that to this desire of mine to be praying continually. I began to realize maybe they're both the same thing. Of constantly keeping in my mind what is the reality I'm trying to live in. And if you've never experienced that sense of mindfulness, when Brenda and I took some training with Mind Body Institute? No, they have another name for it. Well, they're a group that deals with trauma. They work a lot in Center for Mind Body Medicine. They spent a lot of time in Kosovo, a lot of time in the Middle East, and came here after Katrina. They said after Katrina, New Orleans was just as much a war zone as places like Kosovo in the Middle East. And then a very simple exercise to teach what mindfulness is. And when you go home, try this. Take a little piece of chocolate and put it in your mouth and just let it start to dissolve slowly. Taste it, feel it. Just be in that total moment with that piece of chocolate in your mouth. That's mindfulness. And to work on living that in your life is what Buddhist teaching is saying is how you keep that going through everything that you do. Again, we see that merging of the physical world and the spiritual world. Now, Father Ambrose, who was a very, very wise man in my opinion, shared a story with us. And when he first told this story, we all went, "You crazy?" And if this, well, I'm not going to apologize for it because to me it really cuts to the root of what we're talking about here. Ambrose shared with us one time that every time he went to the bathroom, before he flushed the toilet, he offered up a prayer of thanks about how wonderfully made our bodies are. Because if our bodies were not able to eliminate waste, we would die. And so every time he flushed the toilet, for him, that was a prayer of thanks. That's the level I want to experience with everything that I do. That everything that I do is this merging of the physical and the spiritual with all my mind, body, heart, and soul. There's a reason those four things are mentioned together: body, mind, heart, and soul. Because if we really, like a lot of us teach and believe in wholeness, that we should be whole, that's what it means. Too often, like I said, it gets divided. And in some people, it's one versus the other. Some believe they want to truly enjoy the physical world, they got to give up on religion and spirituality. Because for so long, many of the teachers of spirituality taught we have to reject the physical, reject the body. That many of us grew up that the two fight each other all the time. That sin resides in the body and grace resides in the spirit. But I learned to disagree with that. There is only one God, and that source created us, and that source is all good, then therefore, we are all good. So if the physical is good and the spirit is good, they belong together. And to be able to do that in your own life, look for and see where the physical and the spiritual connect in your life. And believe me, the study of Buddhism is one way to do that. And the study in the mystics in Christianity is another way to do that. Way of the Pilgrim, the writings of St. John of the Cross, Teresa of Avila. They very much combine the physical with the spiritual. That's why in these mystical writings, both in St. John of the Cross and St. Teresa of Avila, God is seen as their lover. And a lot of their personal experience with the divine has physical manifestations in their bodies. I once talked about that at a sermon, and letters were written to the bishop, because how dare I bring in some kind of sexual topic in with mystical prayer. But that's what these people wrote about, because that was the fullness of their experience. They just didn't experience God on a spiritual level, they experienced God on a physical level. Or actually, they didn't see any levels there at all. It was all the same thing. Another place where I see this is in my studies and my heritage, in my Irish and Celtic tradition. The early Celts, like a lot of early people, didn't see a separation between the physical and the spiritual. They believed in both, but they didn't see a separation. Whatever they were looking at, they saw the physical and the spiritual at the same time. If they were looking at a tree, they saw the physical and the spiritual. In fact, in Celtic tradition, there's a tree calendar, tree lore, where all these different trees have different properties. And those properties are physical and spiritual at the same time. The oak, which is very important in Celtic tradition, is the divine tree. It is strength. It's also a tree of growth. Imagine a little acorn and an oak tree. It was important to them. And these trees became very much a part of their spiritual tradition because they saw the physical and the spiritual residing in that tree at the same time. And they really couldn't see one without seeing the other. This began to filter into early Celtic Christianity when their concept of prayer became talking to a friend. Early Christian Celts saw their relationship with God as a friend, or a term they used, a soul friend. They would look for people like this in their lives. They would have friends and all, but every once in a while they connected with somebody on that deep spiritual level. And they used the term soul friend. Again, the physical and the spiritual coming together. In fact, there's a term that stems from that Wiccans use very, very often. And it's a simple concept. In fact, it's the title I gave the talk. One foot in one world and one foot in the other at the same time. That as we're walking through life, we have one foot in the physical world and one foot in the spiritual world. One foot in this world and one foot in the other world, which is a very Celtic concept. At the same time. Now, where this becomes important, there was a friend of mine who called me one night because he had been meditating for a long time, over a number of days. And he called me because, and I quote, "I don't know how to get back." And we talked, we grounded and all that, and he learned the lesson that, yes, you can meditate too much. So it's not one or the other. He was going to that other extreme. He was looking just at the spiritual and began to lose touch with the physical. And then I used the physical to help ground him, bring him back, to achieve a word we hear in so many traditions, to achieve a balance. And that's why I like the image of one foot in one world and one foot in the other. Because when we stand like this, you're balanced. It's hard to push you over. And I just love that concept. And it's something that I work with in my own spirituality. No, I cannot tell you that every moment of the day I am mindful of both physical and spiritual all at the same time. That's what I'm striving for. And whatever path you follow, within every path, there are ideas on how to achieve this. You know, and over the years, looking at different traditions, different religions, Native American, various forms of Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, Hinduism, going on. Within those writings, we find ways to do this balance. So whatever tradition you follow, look for that. Look for ways that, how can I achieve this balance in my life to where I can say I'm always in the physical, but I'm at the same time in the spiritual. And for me, the importance of this is probably most seen when we look at death. It's the one thing that scares a lot of people. They don't want to think about it. It's one place where I'll differ from Jack. He likes using the word transition. I use the word death because it hits me right in the face. We're talking the same thing, the ending of this existence and moving on. George Harrison, which those who have known me for a while know is one of my mentors, once said that life really only has one purpose. Life is preparation for death. That what we do in this life is going to prepare us for our death. And he had that on his mind. And he saw his spiritual path as just that he knew this existence was going to end. And he wanted to be prepared for it. And so in his life, in his writings, in his songs, you hear him working on this balance of living in the physical world and being in the spiritual world at the same time. Michael Palin, who you all may know from, he's one of the Pythons from Monty Python, became very, very close friends with George Harrison. And I'll tell you the story how they became friends. After they did Holy Grail, which had a very, very low budget. I don't know if y'all, how many have seen Monty Python, the Holy Grail, and the great thing of the guy behind with the coconuts making the horse sound. You know why they did that? No money. They didn't have enough money to rent horses. So one of them said, let's just get a guy with a coconut. So when they were going to do Life of Brian, most companies did not want to touch it. What do you mean you want to do a comedy about Jesus? Well, it's not really about Jesus, but they didn't want to touch it. So they were getting ready to cancel, not do Life of Brian. And Michael Palin already met George. They talked once in a while. So Michael Palin said he was telling George Harrison that they weren't going to do the movie. And George Harrison, what do you mean you're not going to want to do the movie? How much you need? And Michael Palin said about $2 million. And George says, fine, you got it. And Michael said he asked George, why would you do that? And George had a simple answer. I want to see the movie. So it's not official, but many declared that that was the most expensive movie ticket ever bought. And the movie was made, and thus handmade films came into existence, and they went on to do some other stuff. But when George was dying, I think it was about a week before his death, Michael Palin visited him. And after the visit, Michael Palin said, the one thing that stood out more than anything else was George had no fear. There was no fear of death because he was ready. His whole life, he was preparing for that moment. He was so much attuned within the physical with the spiritual that he knew when the physical ended, he already experienced and was experiencing the spiritual. In fact, the day he died, his son came out shortly after and they asked about it. And he said, simple. My father died conscious of God, fearless of death, and at peace. I have that on my altar at home. I printed it up. I kind of put it into his words. I'm conscious of God, fearless of death, and at peace. That's one thing I'm striving for. And I really believe that the way you do that is balancing that physical and that spiritual, of living in both at the same time. Not seeing your meditation and prayer as one part of your life and your job and other things as another part of your life, but seeing that they're all together. That whatever you do at work is just as spiritual as what we're doing here on Sunday. And being here together is just as physical as playing that flag football game with your friends. That's all intertwined together. That's not easy because we're pulled in so many different directions. What I'm suggesting is that we just look at it and try and keep trying. See within your life where these things fit in together. And after a while, it gets easier and easier. Begin to see, wait a minute, I am doing both at the same time. I can do both at the same time. That they should be done at the same time. And one of the images I have now, when my time comes, I work my life having one foot in one world and one foot in the other. I'm hoping it's like the tradition with the Tibetan monks. They have a tradition that when it's time to die, they go into meditation. And they say they feel their soul rising. And there's a point where their soul doesn't come back. And their brothers go into the chapel. And the monk is sitting in the meditation position, dead. My image in my Celtic tradition is I'm standing there with one foot in one world and one foot in the other. And the moment of death is just this little sidestep. When both feet are now in the spiritual world because I've left the physical. That's when the two become separate. Not now, then. So in your life, look for ways that you can begin to see where all this is connected and work together. I assure you, if you start doing that, you begin to see more and more and more, and it just begins to open up for you. That's why, for me, one of the most important phrases in my personal spiritual path is always have one foot in one world and one foot in the other. Amen. Blessed be. Namaste. Now, as a lot of y'all know who have heard me, I usually have a song to play at the end of my talk, and a couple people have told me they look forward to that, to see what I've picked and how it works. Well, what I'm about to share with you is we always talk about trusting in spirit. Well, sometimes it hits you in the face. Brent and I were talking over the last week, trying to figure out a song that I could use for the end of this talk. And we just could not come up with anything. So I said, oh, well, I just won't do one. And then last night, Jack sent us the order of service, and it showed that Steve is set up to sing us a song. And the song is John Lennon's Imagine. And Brenda and I looked at each other and went, yeah. So I'm looking forward to hearing Steve sing it. And in my mind, it's one of those examples of if you live physical and spiritual at the same time. If more and more of us did that in our everyday life in this world, then what Steve is about to sing need no longer be imagined. It would be.
Oh. Thank you, Paul. That was beautiful. And I have to tell y'all, it is so true. I mean, I got a text last week during Lunch Bunch, and it was from Jack. I didn't see it until much later, but it was, and it said, would you consider doing a solo next week? And I said, oh, well, I guess I could. I mean, it's been a long time. And I said, but what were you looking for? And he said, I don't know, something like Imagine. I said, perfect. Okay, that's easy enough. And so that's really how it happened. So then, he just sent me the backtracks and everything. And I immediately, when he said that, I have to tell you, I always have thought Paul is like a present-day Beatle. I mean, I really have. And John Lennon, this has always been one of my most favorite songs. That's why it was also perfect. It is truly an amazing song. And it says, he was channeling, John Lennon channeling spirit, as he did so often. And it's amazing. And I just thought, wow, John Lennon to me sometimes is just like this current day Jesus walking around, he's just like was so connected. And to write something like this. And I always kind of thought that of Paul. So when I heard Imagine, I was just like, oh my God, and Paul's speaking. Okay, cool. That's like, yeah, it'll go good. And when I walked in, he said, oh, I saw your song. And I said, yeah, that's in honor of you. And I didn't even know that you couldn't find a song. So it's really cool. So true. And thank you for that story, because it makes me believe that everything is imagined and everything comes to fruition that we want. It's really magical. Okay, here we go. Imagine there's no heaven. It's easy if you try. No hell below us. Above us, only sky. Imagine all the people living for today. Imagine there's no countries. It isn't hard to do. Nothing to kill or die for. And no religion to imagine all the people living life in peace, yay. You may say, I'm a dreamer, but I know I'm not the only one. I hope someday you'll join us and the world will be as one. Imagine no possessions. I wonder if you can. No need for greed or hunger. A brotherhood of man. Imagine all the people living all the world. You may say I am a dreamer, but I know I'm not the only one. I hope someday you'll join us and the world will be as one. Thank you.
Paul and Steve, thank you both. That was so beautiful. The message so inspiring and so needed. And Steve, it's one of the beautiful songs ever written. And thank you for singing that. I'd like to ask you to join us now. This is a part of service where we kind of join in a circle of giving. And we affirm our abundance and our prosperity and that flow of life that we all participate in. If you're with us on Facebook today, you can contribute to our community by going to unityofmetairie.com. Also, there's a post below the post that you're watching today, and there's a donate button. And I just want you to know that we're always so grateful for anything that you give to our community. It keeps our programs going, our classes going, and our service. Thank you.
Grateful, grateful, I am grateful for all that I have, all that I am. I am grateful, I'm so grateful. Thankful, thankful, I am thankful for all that I have, all that I am. I am thankful, I'm so thankful. Grateful, grateful, I am grateful for all.
We just have a few announcements today. Just wanted to remind you that this Wednesday we have a meditation service. So please, if you'd like to join us, please join us on Wednesday for that. And also, Sam, have we decided where we're going today for lunch? Okay, so we're going to go to Reginelli's on Clearview. If you haven't joined us, this is a great time for fellowship with your community. It's just a lot of really nice conversation, and we get to know each other more in a way of friendship. So if you're on Facebook and you're in the area, please go to Reginelli's on Clearview And if you haven't been with us before, please join us. Please join me now in our prayer of protection. The light of God surrounds us. The love of God enfolds us. The power of God protects us. The presence of God watches over us. Wherever we are, all is and all is well. Have a beautiful day. Enjoy the Mardi Gras season.
We're doing it backwards this time. We love doing stuff spontaneously here. How about that cover?
All is well, life is good, and I am truly blessed. All is well, yeah, life is good, and I am truly blessed. I let light shine so that everyone can see. I let love divine daily flow through me. All is well, life is good, and I am truly blessed. All is well, yeah, life is good, and I am truly blessed. Help me be the change, oh, the change we want to see, and let harmony flow daily through me. All is well, and life is good, and I am truly blessed. All is well, yeah, life is good, and I am truly blessed. All is well and life is good, I am truly blessed. All is well and life is good, I am truly blessed. All is well and life is good, I am truly blessed. All is well and life is good, I let light shine so that everyone can see. I let love divine daily flow through me. All is well, life is good, and I am truly blessed. All is well, yeah, life is good, and I am truly blessed. All is well, life is good, and I am truly blessed. Yes, I am. All is well, yeah, life is good, and I am truly blessed. I am truly blessed. All right, y'all have a great week. Thank you for coming. Thank you, Facebook. Streamers. If the light goes off,
I know no matter